If you have a TikTok, you can put out 3 videos and the third video gets 2 million views and you just made $20,000 off your product launch. So if you can learn that content style, I don't know how you can fail. It's painfully simple. Everything comes full circle when you're who you're supposed to be. Like I focused on me. It's so cliche, but I didn't spend time, obsessing over girls or chasing these things. Like I was focused on my individual glow up, and it just showed how easy all of the other things tend to fall into place.
Let's say that I found the winning product. I've then developed like a unique product, which is 3%. Let's even say it's 5%, 7% better. What are the actual practical steps of me now promoting that product on TikTok?
I'll break down the step-by-step for building a multi-million-dollar company in this era.
Okay, so 6 months ago, I shared on this channel that I had this crazy goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers. Well, it's not as crazy as I thought. At the time when I said that, we had 3,000 subscribers, and we're so close right now to hitting 100,000. So please help us out with this goal, this crazy dream that I had. Hit that subscribe button. Here's where I wanted to start, because Rob Oliver, people might know you as Rob the Bank. And I wanted to read this tweet that you wrote. You said, in the last 10 years, I've nearly lost my business, sold it later for $30 million, dodged cancer, became a father of 2, found God during dark times. You then go on to say that these past 10 years have been a crazy ride, and it all started with my dad. And so that's where I wanted to begin, that last part. When you reflect on the story, and it's a crazy story, it could be a movie, right? Why do you say that it starts with your dad? Why is that the starting place?
Well, I think that was my inspiration. Like biologically, you're born from your father, but to see the platform that my dad kind of gave me, he was born in a tent in Tennessee, and first child of 5 kids. Mom was 14 when he had him. And that was kind of my baseline for seeing work ethic every single day. Like that was a guy that just blue collar, put in the time, 30, 40 years, as long as I saw him growing up, that was just self-made and self-built. And he's not like crazy, multimillionaire or anything like that, but just to see someone take kind of this idea of like the American dream and make that shit happen while everyone around him is like addicted to meth and falling apart. And so that was always kind of my springboard and really my competition in life too, in a lot of ways, which sounds uncomfortable to say about your father, but it's like, if someone took it from 0 to 1, I need to take it from 1 to 2. And that's really where my story starts.
I'm curious, that is an interesting thing to say, right? That your dad is almost your competition. But I think there's something in that, in the father and son, and you want to take kind of the legacy that they've built and then take it forward. I'm curious where did that thought first start? Like, is there an experience? Is there a moment where you were like...
Yeah, it's become reality. I take pride in saying things that I think a lot of people maybe think, or it's like deep down in there, but it's so uncomfortable to say. You'd never actually say it. And then one of those examples is when I sold my business, the Genius brand, multiple 8-figure thing. He had a distribution company, which was like totally different, that he had built over 30 years and was much smaller than Genius. And we sold our businesses right around the same time. I sold mine first for more money. And like, believe it or not, he's proud of me, but there was also a level of like, whoa, what the fuck? And so I've been through a lot of different father moments, if you will, that there's like this duality in it that anyone out there that has a relationship like with their dad, it can be confrontational. It could be like, he's been my worst enemy and my best friend and my biggest supporter and like the person I've hated the most. I don't think enough people talk about that, but I think it's one of the defining things in so many of our lives. Like if you look back, I share a lot of those traits that he has that I probably can't stand. And the fact I have those traits is also probably why he butts heads with me, right? And so we just have these different worldviews that have shaped with like a fundamental underlying personality. And it's made me.
I'm curious. I'm curious to get into kind of the early years. And it's interesting, right? Like when we think about school or we think about high school, you almost have like these different archetypes of what the kids are like, right? You have like the jock, like the cool kids. You have the nerd, the loser, the loner, the ones that like struggle getting girls. I'm curious for you, what kind of kid were you? Like if I'd gone back to your school and observed, like what would I have seen?
I mean, I was a misfit in every way. I didn't fit in. Right? So picture sophomore year, I'm 5, and now I'm 6'4", like good athlete, like do all these things. But sophomore year, I'm 5'3". I grew up, basketball is my life. So I'm naturally in just kind of that culture. And so I'm this 5'3" kid who doesn't necessarily get in with like any of the white kids, but then on the like on the black side, like I'm not like super accepted there. And so I was just this little misfit. I mean, 5'3", and then junior year I'm still like 5'7". And I mean, girls was like the biggest struggle of my life. That's the age you start crushing on everyone, and I used to have this confidence about me. I still do. I've tried to brainwash myself in a way that like I think it's important. We can talk about that later. But even back then, you know, like I didn't mind shooting a shot. Basketball court, I'd shoot the shot. Girl I like, I'd shoot the shot. I've told this story a couple times, but like one of the hardest moments for me my sophomore year, I just moved to the new public school in my area, and there was the one girl I really liked, and I had math class with her, and we kind of built like a little relationship. In her eyes, in hindsight, it's obviously just like this is my little cute dorky friend. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, I can like pull this, right? And there was a song I love music, and the lyrics like really resonate with me for her, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Now I remember writing it on a little love note and going and handing it to her, and like but kind of running off. Like I didn't stand there and wait, but I still had visibility of her, and she was with her friends. And I remember she looked and like read it to the group, and they all laughed, and she kind of like crinkled it, like didn't fully tear it, but just kind of crinkled it. And it was like, oh, and that shit made my heart like sink. Like I felt this sick, disgusting, whatever feeling. And pretty much from there until later senior year, I had very little success with women.
Mm. You know what's interesting, actually? You mentioned that you were a misfit. And I think when you were younger, it's difficult to be a misfit because you want to be, you're feeding into all of these things. Like you want to be liked, you want to be popular, you want other kids to like you, you want the girls to like you. And so when an experience like that happens, what is the effect of Rob Oliver in sophomore year? Like, what does that do to your confidence?
Here's the truth. I think we're all inherently individuals and misfits in some capacity. Society is engineered in a young way, because you said in high school, right, that you just desire to fit in. Bro, that shit's more relevant as you get out of high school. You're trying to find your entrepreneur group, or you're trying to find your coworkers. Like we seek to be a part of a group, and so we often compromise our personality and who we are, and more importantly, what we have to bring to the world, the more we fall into that. And there's reasons for it. There's social expectations. Like if you walk around like a goth with, like heavy clothes, what's the chance you're going to get a tech job? Like zero, right? So we're forced to conform to this new world that isn't necessarily us. And in the process, we lose ourselves, and we're not living for who we want to be. And we lose that independence. And so that's kind of my personal brand nowadays, the whole rob the bank thing. It's been like I have this luxury of having made enough money in my mid-20s where I can kind of stand up and be who I want to be, but most importantly, hopefully be a symbol for anyone else out there who wants to be them. Because, I mean, hate is abundant. It comes nonstop. But the more in tune you are with who you're supposed to be, the better off your life tends to get. Like, and that's me saying that firsthand. And so I guess that's kind of, that was a long answer there, but that's my general message to people is like, embrace that natural misfit tendency. Don't fall into the crowd no matter what. And it's really hard in high school. Like that's where the pain is. But if you felt that pain, just know that's going to be a blessing later on. Because if I didn't go through all those experiences and get ostracized or outcast, like I wouldn't have had the awareness or vision to create my own company. Because it happened again when I'm start building my business. This is the cliche entrepreneur story, but the second you go all in on something with passion, you lose people, you lose friends, and they talk shit at first. Like all those little gimmicky entrepreneurial quotes about like first they laugh, then they ask you how you did it. Like that's all for real. I'm sure you're running this 100%. Up. I'm sure you got friends back home. Like good luck with the little podcast or whatever, right? Like it's like, cute. And now you're gonna break 100,000 subs, and they're kind of like, oh, he's for real. But that's kind of my message. I hope just to embrace that misfit nature.
Yeah. No, I love that. That is so true. I want to get into the rob the bank stuff and the entrepreneurial rise. Before we do though, I'm curious, like, so you go through this experience, it's soul crushing, right?
And you talk about the fact that you're a misfit. You grew up a misfit. And the point that you are now, I can tell even in the way you dress, the way you present yourself, your brand, you fully leaned into it, like you've embraced it. But it doesn't always start like that. And I felt that firsthand, right? Like there's certain moments where you almost kind of lean into trying to be like everyone else, trying to please the crowd. And so I'm curious, when you reflect on your early story, is there a moment where in your mind it's kind of the time where it's almost like you lost yourself a bit, like you started trying to play into the crowds or like trying to lean into being like everyone else? Like what comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say throughout life, yeah, I mean, for sure. Let me think back, like even, early college, I'm looking back at how I dressed, or even those years, I mean, I think that's where I got criticized half the time. Like basketball's my life, bro. Like I'm trying to make that varsity team. I played on good AAU teams growing up, and so I'm dressing like basketball players, like for lack of a better, like it's more street, and like that was where I was leaned into, and then any of my white friends, I was like kind of friends with those groups. They're not treating me the same. And so I remember one day I went to like fucking Abercrombie and I'm like, maybe this is how I need to be dressing, And I'm like, God, why does this store smell so bad? What's going wrong? What's wrong in here? But it's been a constant accumulation of events where I'd say I haven't stuck to me until like when I was building that first company, I let go of all that stuff. And that was one of my first times where I got tunnel vision, and it wasn't like on style or anything like that. I looked like a dork, but I was living for me. I knew I was living for me. I knew I was living for what I need to do. And kind of as I've rounded into this phase of my career, like I'm doing the same, but it's a little more, it's in a different way. It's public. Like I buy the things I like. I'm interested in fashion. I'm interested in design, and I have no problem standing behind those things because they're me. And I think the more you kind of iterate down to that, we're all one of one. At the end of the day, we really are one of one. And the more you iterate to find that individualism, the more fulfilled you're going to be.
No, I love that, and it's so true. You know what? I think it's interesting. Even when I look back at my own life, there's certain moments, I almost call them like trigger moments, where it was just a sign to me of like you have to bet on yourself, like you have to go all in on you. And so I'm curious, when you think back to that, and you talk about even the experience of being in like in the Abercrombie store, trying to dress like these other kids, what was kind of that first moment where you were like, "Fuck that! I'm just going all in on me." Like, what was the trigger point?
So I've got a couple. Let me tell you a couple good ones. I have one story that I saved for this because I've told the story about the girl breaking my heart when I was 14 or 15 or whatever. What I don't tell is what happened when I was like 23. I've been with my wife for a long time, and there was a breakup where we were not together for 6 months. And so this girl from my high school in college, one of the first times I went all in was when I decided that I wanted to play basketball again. So I walked onto that team and it became my life, and I transformed physically. Like I got jacked. I was a practice player, but like my whole life changed. That was like my first glow up, right? And I get back after college that last year, and I'm working out at my local gym, and that girl's there, and we had like a decent relationship. And I remember she comes up to me and my friend, and she like puts her hand on my shoulder and she says, "Oh my God, Rob, you've gained like 50 pounds of muscle," like something like that. And long story short, I slayed that demon, for lack of a better term, while I was on a break with my wife. And it just kind of, that was one of the moments though, where I realized everything comes full circle when you're who you're supposed to be. Like I focused on me. It's so cliche, but I didn't spend time, obsessing over girls or chasing these things. Like I was focused on my individual glow up, and it just showed how easy all of the other things tend to fall into place. And so that was one of the moments. And then I'd say more recently too, there hasn't been like an aha, but it's been the more that I double down on who I'm supposed to be, the better life keeps getting. And that's operating from a place of like very natural abundance. That's investing in others around me. That's giving back. That's not being afraid to buy the pants I want or whatever. And things just keep getting better. Like in general, business keeps going better. Like I've made more money, at least on paper with some of the brand growth and stuff, in the last 2 years than I did my entire career prior. And it's not like I wasn't successful before that, but that was me going in on me, on like, truly. And the results speak for itself. The results speak for themselves.
I think it's actually, the self-improvement is like an addictive angle, because you start doing it and you start seeing the results and what happens, and it just, each win spurs you on to the next win. And you know what? I wanted to share a quote that you put on your Twitter. You said Nietzsche was right on the money when he said that the modern man has to literally relearn how to believe in himself. You need to teach yourself to be confident. You do this by taking bets and surpassing your own expectations. Eventually, you build a big enough portfolio of wins to rest your laurels on. Start stacking confidence points now.
Yeah. I think modern society in general, again, it forces conformity. That's why there's like this obsessive idea of like the Matrix or whatever, which I totally reject, because I never think it's never been easier to create your own life and design your own life and make money however you want and all that stuff. We can talk about that more later. But in today's world, they don't like accept someone who stands up and wants to claim W's. That's pushed away. And again, there's so many reasons, like societally, why you shouldn't shoot the shot, why you shouldn't start the business, right? But in reality, this is the greatest place in the world, greatest time in history to be building anything. And it's like, what's the worst case if you fail? Like, I mean, even we have bankruptcy law. Like, there's literally no downside to starting to stack wins. And we've gotten so far out of that game. It's not even funny. And so, again, I hope to lean into messages like that, because I'm only one person. But if some of these messages become more mainstream, have you heard the idea of life maxing, which I've been pushing? I mean, life maxing is just this idea that you need to take your scorecard and you have your different main traits, and then you max all of those out. So it can be business. There's often something physical, like, for me, it's martial arts. I love to box. Like, I do that several times a week. Experiences, and basically you reject this idea of balance in exchange for an obsessive foot on the gas everything in life. Like, even when you're finding peace, it's in like recovery through, a trip or whatever, but you're constantly investing in all the components of life that are going to max out your life. And that inherently fuels each thing. Like, every new time I go do an experience like this, flying to New York to do this podcast, I told you, like, I wanted to come to New York. I wanted to spend some time here. That was an investment in an experience. It was an investment in a relationship, but that's going to come back. And I'm not worried about work-life balance or anything. I'm trying to set up a life where I'm constantly working. And the more that people can align that way in a young age, the better off they're going to do. The TikTok shop kids are a phenomenal example of this, and we can talk about that later.
You know what I've realized? The default kind of mood or mindset, I feel like, when I observe a lot of people, and we all fall into this in different stages of our life, is kind of indifference.
Yeah.
It's like almost like apathy. It's like just...
but in the wrong way. We numb ourselves to the fact we're dying. Like, you go walk the streets of Wall Street right now, and even the intern doing the private banking thing, like, he is so focused on that day and getting back to working his 14-hour day and getting on the couch and just working to be 30 to get that promotion, to be the millionaire, to be the, like, it's soul numbing versus crafting out a life where you're indifferent to people's opinion of you, right? We're indifferent to the reality that we're going to die, and you need to be indifferent to the reality that other people's opinions don't matter.
And I feel like the reason I even mention that is that the energy that you bring, it's like you're going after it. And I can tell even the way that you speak, there's like, it's personal for you. And I find that interesting. Whenever someone sits in that chair and they're speaking about something, and I can tell it's personal. To me, what that signals is that there's some sort of experience. There's something that's happened in their life that they're like, I'm not doing this at 50%. I'm going to do this like my life depends on it, because it does. It's personal. And so I'm kind of curious for that. Like, why is it so personal for you, this kind of relentless drive to self-improve, to get better? Why is that such a strong thing?
I think the biggest question is, what do you want in life? And then when you realize that anything in life requires a certain level of effort and focus, if you want it in a meaningful amount of time, then there's truly no other way to behave. I mean, if you want to build a business, like, go through Silicon Valley and you're not going to see any guys that half-assed it, that did it part-time. If you want to build a monster podcast, you fucking, I know you live and breathe this thing. I know, I've seen the growth in a short amount of time. You're a perfect example, but that's just what it takes. And it's not meant to be like the dry Hormozy, like, you just need to work 1 million hours. It's like, no, you need to find your passion and your flow. And in that, it doesn't even feel like you're working. But if you're not taking that approach, then I don't think there's any point in doing it. Like I think people spin their wheels. I know people spin their wheels and waste their time quarter-assing something when they're 80 years old, that will have mattered zero. Whereas building a huge show or building a brand that's going to live beyond me, those are impactful things. And I would rather put all my time and effort into those. And so I guess I do talk about them very obsessively, but it starts to become second nature when it becomes your life.
You know what? You mentioned the point about quarter-assing, like just not putting your all into it. And I wanted to read this because you had a moment of that. And you said, life was great during college, but then I graduated and I had no idea what to do next. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but at that time I was lost. I went through a dark period of my life. I was smoking weed daily, constantly having depressive thoughts. There was no clear path for me to make it. Can you just talk about that period?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated a little bit early. I had like running start credits. And I finished college and I was like, I'm going to take this time off. And that was one of the first times I just end up on the couch every day playing Call of Duty, smoking. And it's like the best thing in the world for a week. And then 2 weeks, you're like, what am I doing with my life? And by the end of a month, you're like, what's the point of this existence? Like, period. I just spent this time in college. My basketball years are done. What am I going to do next? And I think this is a point where maybe a lot of people tune it out and just like start to numb themselves, start to become indifferent. They train themselves. I think a lot of people have like a mild depression, and rather than address it and be in tune with it and ask themselves why, it becomes part of their life. It becomes their normal. And so that's what eventually prompted me to just like, hey, I have to figure this out. That's when I went and shadowed my uncle. Like I spent some more time with my dad, and I was like, I just have to find out how to make it in some capacity. This is before early social media too. So I don't have like Ty Lopez telling me I need to make money online or Tim Ferriss 4 Hour Work Week or anything. This is just a kid becoming in tune with his emotions and becoming in tune with the reality that this isn't a forever thing. This life isn't a forever thing. And you have to start figuring it out and you have to carve something out. So
I remember Chris Williamson says this thing. He says, most people live lives of quiet desperation.
yeah, it's exactly that, right? That depression kind of starts and few people are brave enough to address it. They say, you know what, if I get that corporate job, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to. And then they start that corporate job and then it's like, it becomes worse, but it's like, if I get that promotion or get a vacation to kind of break you out of it briefly, but you zoom out 30, 40 years. And I think millennials as a whole, like have really, really fucked up. Like the dream of the millennials has been a little social media and a tech job and a, Starbucks to go. And the end result is like less kids, less fulfillment, all of this stuff. But I think we're seeing it right size with the younger generation that's becoming more self-aware, if you will. But yeah, Chris hit that one on the head.
No, 100%, 100%. Do you remember the day it kind of changed? Like, if the default is that most people live lives of quiet desperation and you're going through these days where day after day, it's like smoking weed, playing video games.
Yeah.
You remember the day where you're like, no, this is different.
So that moment was another gradual shift. And eventually I fell at Amazon. And when I found Amazon, I started to make some money. And that was like a bit of a cure, right? Like life started to feel a little bit better. I'd still live my normal life. Like I'd go to the gym, I'd eat Chipotle, but I was still kind of on autopilot. Everything really changed when I got a phone call from my mom. I was sitting in my little desk, like just starting my day. And she's like, hey, I need you to know that your dad took your grandma in for an operation this morning and she didn't wake up. And I'm like, what do you mean she didn't wake up? Like my Nana is what we call her. She was the center of our family, 70, super young, had lived a crazy life. I told you she had my dad when she was 14. And all of a sudden, she's not waking up. And I'm like, what does that mean? And basically she went in, she had an operation on her leg, freak deal, and her heart stopped. And they did revive her. And so this, I think, is what made it worse and more surreal. They revived her, but she was totally brain dead. And so, immediately we go to the emergency room. My whole family spent the entire week there. And she's a vegetable. And we're just praying for that 0.01% miracle all week. And I see my dad cry for the first time in his life. I see, my grandpa beg her to wake up. And it never happened. And on Easter of all days, this was like the moment. On Easter, after she'd been out for a week, we all go in that room and there's a decision made to pull the plug and everyone circles around her and we hold hands. My dad couldn't be in there. My grandpa couldn't be in there. It was like me, my mom, and mostly women, and play this song she loved, Rocket Man by Elton John. And they pulled the plug and, she takes a gasp and you just see the flat line. And that was after like a week of hell. And I remember going to the window and kind of looking out. It's in Seattle and feeling like almost spirits. It was like this surreal like energy where I don't know if it's her leaving the room or what, but you're like, what the fuck? And pretty much like the day after that, we're all sitting at dinner and it's like life goes on. And you have to find this kind of new normal. But most importantly, you remember that like, yo, that's going to happen to my dad. That's going to happen to me. And that kickstarted this fever. Like that was when I like, hold on, I have this Amazon thing. I'm making 20 grand a month. I'm seeing, guys build these bigger brands. Why not me? Why not do something she'd be proud of? Why not do something I'd be proud of? And that was pretty much the moment where I abandoned my old life, like dramatically. Like I stopped going to the gym. I realized this internet thing was here. I can create something that changes my life, at least changing my life forever. And I poured in that shit like fucking crazy. But it was that prompt with death or experience with death that tends to kind of be a recurring theme in my life, that it focuses you. You get one shot and you're only going to live for you. And so that was that was the first moment where like a light bulb really came on.
Yeah. Damn, that is something. And you know what? You know where my mind goes is I think like with our parents and grandparents, we kind of look at them as like superheroes. You don't even look at them as like real humans. Mm-hmm. Like if they get sick, like when my mom gets sick, it's like, wait, she's like ill.
What are you doing? Yeah, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, like that never happens. Because we always look at them as like they have the answers. Mm-hmm. They know what's going to happen. They know, they can almost predict the future.
And that's what I mean, bro. My dad has been like the strongest person I've known my entire life. Like he raised that family. And I still remember, one of his friends came up to the emergency room and it'd been like a day or two. And I didn't see him cry. I knew he'd been crying previously, but the friend came and he just exploded into tears and hugged the guy. And I was like, that was one of the like sickest feelings of my life. Like it made me cry and I'm just like, what the fuck? It's like these surreal, but real. I mean, that's like, this is real life. Like this is going to happen. This will happen. You don't know what day the Reaper is going to call. All of our lives are stories written by authors that we can't even see it. We can get in tune with it and influence it, but we need to appreciate all of it and actually do stuff that matters.
It sounds like that moment kind of lit a fire. Like you already had success. Like things were already going
success,
well to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But then it seems like from that moment, you just took it to another level. And I think so much when we hear stories, people talk about that in like the abstract of like, oh, I just doubled down. I started doing something. I want to get specific. And what I mean by that is if someone had like observed your life, what you were doing on a day-to-day basis, maybe a month before that event happened, and then they'd seen the way that you were working, I don't know, maybe 3 months afterwards.
Yeah.
Like what was the shift? Like on the day-to-day, like what was the shift?
You wouldn't recognize the person. My life prior to that was like gym bro split. Like I was happy enough to be able to work 5-6 hours, less than most people, get to LA Fitness by 3 o'clock and lift for 2.5 hours, and then go to Chipotle and shoot the shit with the buddy I always lifted with. And I was just always super proud of my lifts, my useless fucking lifts. Like everyone should lift to a certain point and then like, all right, bro, you're 230 pounds. No one cares if you can bench 315. And then when that happened, you fast forward 3 months later and I didn't leave a cage. Like I locked myself in my home office and like, I mean, straight, like it's kind of embarrassing. Like I didn't really shower that much. like I was like, there's old pictures of me for real where you're like, who is this guy? But I just saw this Amazon thing growing and I saw this actual opportunity in front of me. And I was like, if I don't master this trait, then I will have left generational opportunity on the table for whatever I want to pass down in this world. And so that was the shift. And if you looked at me then and maybe 6 months after, right? But like I literally had this thought in my head. Maybe it's crazy, maybe it's not, but a haircut is a waste of time. Not money, it was just a waste of time. Like me going in and getting my haircut is an hour that I could be putting towards this thing. And that's how I thought in terms of everything I did. And I was wildly inefficient business-wise. Like I'm this kid figuring it out. I wasted all this time trying to figure out different components of the business. But my fundamental thought process was anything not going to this is a waste of potential millions down the road. And boy, my hair got wild, bro.
You know what? Give people the context. You spoke about it. It's like Amazon at that time was like a generational opportunity. Like when you say that, like what was it that you were building?
I built a supplement company. That was my first thing. I built a portfolio of supplement companies. The Genius brand is the main one that's still up there, leader in nootropics. But when I was on that platform, it was like a reseller platform. And like I used to go to other top brands that are selling in GNC and Vitamin Shop. And like I was like, hey, I can help you sell on Amazon. They're like, oh, Amazon's not that serious. Like whatever. I was like, no, just give me a shot, you know? And I'd get them listed. And this is how I started. And they would be making some sales. Like all of a sudden, it's like 20% of their business, 30% of their business, these massive conglomerates. I'm like, guys, this is the new platform and it's already doing that kind of revenue. You should really focus here. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, whatever. Like they'd like me, but they didn't pay me that much mind or take it that seriously. And it was eventually where I realized like, okay, this is my time. Like if they're not going to pour into this and they're doing, 25 million with all these other channels and I can do 25 million just here with better margins, like this is my time. And so it was so wide open back then. There's no one bidding on keywords. It's very easy to rank at the top of SEO. Like when you hear people talk about Amazon being saturated today, it's not saturated. There's more customers than ever. But the easy days of like just you could throw a pre-workout up there and literally be at the top of pre-workout and be making 20 sales a day without spending any money. Like it was that, wide open. And so, that's how I got my start. I saw this vehicle.
Yeah. I want to take one of the quotes you spoke about risk. You said I took $5,000 I had in savings and invested into developing my own supplements brand. That's when my first brand was born. Talk about that, just taking everything, going all in.
Yeah, because for me it was clear at the time. I lived at home. I didn't have this like crazy lifestyle. And I'm seeing all this stuff happen. I'm like, I have to figure out how to launch my own brand. This is where people stress out today. They're like, how do you get a product made? How do you find a manufacturer? All that stuff. That's the easiest part. The hard part is figuring out how to sell it at scale, right? So when you have a Amazon or you have a TikTok shop, like that's where most brands struggle. Getting the brand made was as simple as like, I called this manufacturer who I'd met at a trade show. They knew I kind of did Amazon. I was like, hey, if I give you a deposit, can you front me on the rest of this? Like I'll turn it to profit. And they, like I said, they knew me at the time. I'd helped other brands. So like, yeah, whatever, kid. Like we'll give you a shot. And I had to go for it. It's like if I lost that $5,000, and I knew I wouldn't. Like when you get to a certain point with your skills and you see like a very clear opportunity, you're just like, how much money can I make? How big can I scale? I never felt the risk of losing that because the deck starts to get stacked in your favor. You know what I mean? Like if you have the skills, if you put in the time, then it becomes exponentially easier to succeed. What do they say? It's like, 8 out of 10 businesses fail or 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Those are the 9 people that didn't have like an edge or a clear-cut path to scaling the thing. I had that piece. And so, I threw that in there and we turned that to a much bigger number very fast.
It also sounds like your mindset at that point was just at a different level. Like it was almost like a refusal that you would lose.
No, it was. Succeed. You tie back to that Nietzsche quote about stacking wins and stacking confidence. Like that's what I had done. I had got on the sales calls and sold the big brands on how to succeed on there. And I'd spent time with those teams and, I'd done sales on Amazon with other people's products. Like, I'm like, this is clear. I have the confidence to launch this. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, let's go. Now's the time. But it came back to all those years prior of putting in the time and learning the stuff. And yeah, that's kind of what made it go.
Yeah. We're going to get into the TikTok shop stuff because the same way that you said that in 2012 or 2013 when you started Genius Brands, Amazon FBA was like a generational opportunity. I've heard you speak about TikTok shop in that same way. So we'll get to that. But I want to start by what was the early period of Genius Brands like, right? Because you take this $5,000 in savings, which to most people and to most people listening, if you told them to take their savings and put it into a new platform, it would be insane to them. Like it would feel like stepping off a ledge, right? Like,
which is actually insane to me. I'm trying so hard to get back into touch with, I'm 32 now and I forget those days. But to me, it's insane to do that Wall Street thing I just said, or the tech job, or the, even worse. You know what I mean? Like, that's the insane part to me. Because it's like, what's the outcome? You lose $5,000 and you have to start again eventually, or you commit your life to something that's like damn near modern prison. I mean, in a lot of ways, like you said, it's a quiet, what's the Williamson quote?
Most people live lives of quiet desperation.
Quiet desperation. That sounds horrible. So I don't know. I think through that lens, I think we got to try to change that narrative too, because there's, again, as we talk about TikTok and some of these opportunities to start with nothing, like it's there. Did you put a lot of money into starting the show?
I was working when I started the show.
Yeah.
And I was doing it on the side.
Yeah.
But when I left my job to do this full time, maybe 15, 16 months ago. This was making no money when I left.
Did you have the platform started? Like, was it started?
Yeah, I was already doing it for a year.
Yeah.
But like the audience wasn't anywhere close to what it is now. I kind of just I go off instinct. So I see an opportunity and then I'm like, I'm just going to do it.
And you felt like you had the skills at that point, and like, you know.
I knew it was my thing.
Yeah. I mean, you're good at it. And after a year of doing it, like, you know, you're stacking the deck in your favor. That's how I feel.
And you know what it is? It's like, I understand how you get to that mindset where it's, why won't people take the risk? I also understand the other side of it, which is like, you at this point have like stacked the wins. Like you have so many proof points of the risk working that it's like, why wouldn't you do it? And so get into like when you were building Genius Brands, what was that initial period like? Because, and I'm feeling this firsthand, like business is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like it is tough to build a business.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes years to actually get good at what you're doing. But it sounds like for you, it was actually, you had some success out of the gate with Genius Brand. So like, what were those initial periods like?
Well, I had some positive cash flow, right? So I was in the green, I was making some money. But in terms of building an actual business, like the complexity that goes into that, it's insane when you start hiring people. And like, I'm doing all this from scratch. I don't have a mentor. I don't watch much YouTube. Like I'm having to figure out like, okay, now I have 3 employees. Should we use this Slack thing, you know, to communicate? Like, how do we organize the Slack channel? How do we Dropbox or Google Drive? And how do you, like all these different pieces I'm having to learn from scratch. But I'll tell you what, because I found the outlet I liked and something I was like super interested in, I liked it every day. Like I was super excited to go answer those questions. There was that flow-esque state. And that ties back to the life maxing thing. The more you can align with that flow-esque state, the more you're going to get out of your life. Because none of that, like now I look back and all this stuff that I take is second nature. And I'm trying to like get to a point where I can re-communicate that to people in the early stages. But all of that was self-learned because I'm flowing. Like period. I probably learned more. I know for a fact I learned more in those first 2 years than I did at any point ever in my modern education. You know, like college, useless, high school, useless. You don't learn marketing. You don't learn management until you're doing that shit. Like I remember having this surreal reflection moment where it was like, I was a horrible student, but there was this management class, 404. It's like your peak management class in college. And there's this woman teaching it that was like the superstar professor. And she had never done anything in her entire life other than teach that class. And so I apologize. It was negotiation. She had never done anything other than teach negotiation. And I remember when I was selling my business to private equity, thinking back to that class going like, she would have died in this world, like died. And yet she was the one that had every single opinion ever on what you are and aren't doing right in negotiation. And so you learn from doing it, and then you max out your learning when you're doing something you actually enjoy, because none of us are going to, like, the information is not going to stick if it's shit we don't like.
You know what's interesting, and maybe you'll remember this when you're running a business, and especially when it's like the first real business that you've done, and this is what I'm experiencing right now, is even when things are working, every new stage is something new, and you haven't done it before. You have no reference, especially for people that are like, you don't come from some wealthy family where like your dad had a successful business and can like coach you through the whole thing, and so there's sometimes this anxiety, even when things are going well, because you're now like, okay, I need to now hire like a manager for like my bit. And then like there's these new things that you haven't done, you have no reference for it. And it's actually like, it can make you anxious.
My God, it arguably gets more anxiety ridden and more stressful because the stakes just keep getting higher and higher. Like one of our portfolio companies that I don't talk about and I just keep kind of private, but you know, we're breaking that off entirely and hiring a CEO and going for retail and doing all of these things, like hiring a true C-suite team. And that's the makeup of being a multiple 9-figure business. And it's not something I've done. And luckily on that side, I have a partner who has had an exit like that. And so there's some familiarity there. But you talk about anxiety and stress on like, hey, I can make the marketing machine go. I can get this TikTok thing working. I can make Amazon work. But now we're talking HR departments and CEO and this whole different thing. It's about as stressful as can be, because if you shoot the wrong shot there, it sets you back. You know, maybe we have a window of 3 to 5 years to build a generational, $500 million brand. But if you misstep on any of these, the stakes are higher, right? And I think you have to remind yourself of how far you've come this whole time. Like if I would have told myself 2 years ago, as I kind of re-embarked on the whole thing, I'd be where I'm at right now. I'd be like, oh, that's incredible. But I still wake up and have days where I'm like, this isn't going fast enough, or this is stressful, or whatever. And so again, that's that mental framing of entrepreneurship that isn't talked about enough. Like the higher you go, you have to kind of make it a superpower to catch yourself mentally and never let those negative or dominant thoughts become reality. Because thoughts do tend to become reality. And if you keep playing that story in your head over and over again, like, hey, I'm supposed to be so-and-so and I'm supposed to have these guests on my podcast by now or whatever, eventually that can manifest in the wrong way. Whereas if you come at it from a more abundant place and you're curious and you ask the right questions to people that have done it and have brought in a podcast manager or whatever, right? Then you're gonna get so much further. And so I'm a big fucking believer of what goes on up here, regardless of where you're at. Like the bigger you get.
Yeah, I remember we had a guest come on here. His name is Hunter Hammonds, and he said the best entrepreneurs tend to just be the best like stress managers.
Well, think about it like this. I had like this breakthrough the other day. The difference between a billionaire and the average person is their ability to handle stress. Like you think about a Bezos and he has Amazon, Blue Origin. How many personal investments does he have? How many different properties does he have? Like as I've learned to be wealthy over the last 5-6 years, I got real estate, I got liquid assets, I got crypto, I have personal employees that, manage the house. There's all these different avenues of stress. Like, whereas, some people are like, man, they get upset if they're like, I don't know, like people get stressed about all sorts of stuff. And unless you learn to shake all of that off, then you're not going to grow into that next tier. So as soon as I started thinking about it through the lens of like, how much do billionaires actually handle? And I'm just preparing myself to be hopefully in that league, the easier it got, right? Like it's kind of a badge of honor to be able to shrug off like, oh, I just lost $1 million in crypto. Like, whatever. I'm not going to let that ruin this interview. I'm not going to let that ruin my business. I'm going to keep trudging forward.
You know what? It's like when you're in those early moments, I think just because you're not as experienced, the losses or like when the stress does rise, it feels more impactful because you don't have that framework of like how to handle it. And so I'm curious, like you're going through this period as you're building genius brands and you're continuing to scale. And it's like new level, new devil, right? Like that's the quote. As every level, it's like these new things that you're dealing with. Is there like a peak moment of stress, like a peak moment of anxiety, like a story that you remember where it was like, that almost overcame me even, like that was it.
From overnight, I went from thinking I was going to be a multimillionaire, like liquid on paper. I was going to go tell everyone, fuck you, I did it, to, oh my God, I'm going to have to lay off my friends and go get a 9-to-5. And what happened, basically there was this Amazon algorithm change, and overnight they more or less wiped half of our products of reviews. And they did this to a lot of brands. This was like a pivotal Amazon moment, I think late 2018. I mix up all my years. But we woke up and half of the business was gone. To make it worse, I told you how obsessive I was. This was the first time in years that I took away from the business. I got married in Ireland. And the night of my wedding ceremony, all this shit started to happen. So I'm on time change. I'm communicating with my guys back home. Like, what's going on? I'm already kind of anxious because I hate being away from the business. And in the course of like 48 hours, Amazon decided that these products were whatever, and they smashed us. And so all of a sudden, our business is cut in half. And I think they're going to keep doing it to more products because for a month, every Tuesday, they would hit new products and more or less kill these products. And so it was in that moment, I had like a literal anxiety attack. Like I remember, hyperventilating and shit. I went and grabbed some like CBD in Ireland. Thought that would help. It didn't. Made it worse. I'm freaking out over there. And when I got back, like I sat down with my key guys. These are my two best friends. And, one of them has a kid, like his life's dependent on this business. Like his whole salary, he's got, like, I'm taking care of him on the equity, but he's all in. And we're all sitting there like, there's, I don't know, there's maybe like $1 million in the bank or something at this point. And we go, I guess we could take this and like run or whatever, like kind of at least say we did something. And we looked around, we go, this is happening to other people. Why don't we launch into those new categories? Why don't we take that money, triple down on this thing, understand that we didn't do anything wrong. We kind of got caught up in like a bad mix. Big tech is big tech, and they always run systems and algorithms. And so we doubled down and we went after like 3 main categories that the leaders had been smashed, and maybe rightfully so. Like a lot of black hat guys got hit then too. And so basically we end up creating 3 of our best products in this time period. Our business almost roars back to like exactly where it was. 6 months later, Amazon restores the reviews on the existing products. And that was like this rocket fuel. And that was one of the most pivotal moments in entrepreneurship for me, because it comes back to sports. It's like under pressure. Like when you're under pressure, how are you responding? Are you going to turtle up and be a little bitch? Or are you going to like stand up and own it and make good decisions? And the best entrepreneurs I've seen, like one of the private equity guys I met down the line, they are just famous for when the house is on fire, being that voice of reason and that steady hand that is going to guide you through whatever that situation might be. It still might not be good on the other side, but they're like a calm, collected mind. And I think my sports instincts kicked in at that moment. But since then, it's reinforced such this pivotal belief that that's what makes the great ones.
There's this line that Drake says in a song. He says, imagination running wild with the speculation.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of what you mentioned earlier, which is like, we all have these fears and like these insecurities. I call it like the quiet voice in your head, that when things start to kind of not go your way a little bit, it's like this little voice that's like, you were never able to do that thing, or like...
Bro, we're narrative machines. And we have all sorts of beliefs that have been ingrained into us through the years. And that's what I said, where thoughts tend to create reality. You need to be able to flesh out those thoughts because they're often ridiculous, like truly ridiculous. Like I'm famous for this. I can tell this story in my head of how I'm going to lose everything, like with the perfect cataclysmic whatever. And if you succumb to those, a lot of the time you'll make your life exponentially worse. Like, do those wild thoughts ever come true? Like, probably not. But on the flip side of that, if you can create a positive narrative, a positive internal talk track, you start to become unstoppable. I mean, truly, it's, again, stacking that confidence, but more importantly, training your mind to become who you need to be, like being there mentally already. And that's that whole law of attraction. That's that whole gravitational pull to becoming who you're supposed to be. It's not foo-foo. It's not like super magic. It's very rational. And I mean, you said it best.
I'm curious though, because your nightmare was kind of happening. Like you wake up that morning in Ireland and you see that like your business is going down in the way that it is. I'm just like, what is your mindset? Like what is happening in your mind? What are the fears? Like,
I mean, for 48 hours, bro, I mean, I'm 24, 25-year-old kid. The world is ending for sure. And I am succumbing to speculation, and I am worst case scenario, and I'm freaking out my guys. And I mean, all that stuff is real. I mean, it was like a truly horrible moment. But again, there was a solution in it. And how many people in that same instance, I know plenty of brands. I know one guy that like fire sold his shit. He had a business that was worth $20 million. He sold it for $1 million. So it's in those moments where you need to be sound. Because even like, hey, worst case, we had a good team. We had the skills. Like if that business went to zero, we could have started something again. We could have figured it out. Someone would have funded it. There's often always an answer. But you can compound it negatively and make your life dramatically worse. It's like the idiot who, sells at the bottom of the stock market because the world's ending. Has the world ended yet? Like, no. Did it crash 50% in COVID? Yeah. Did we then go on to have the greatest bull market ever? Like, yeah. And so it's being more in tune with the nature of reality while attracting a level of positivity and like true iron mindset.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? It's like it's the panic that gets you. Like often when things go like cataclysmically wrong,
it's emotional. Yeah.
It's not the initial thing that happened. It's the knee-jerk reaction.
It's everything you do after, 100%. Yeah. And so, I mean, now, like I've had horrible shit happen now, but I don't even talk about it because it's been more like, it's just who I'm training to be. It's just another day in the office. Like it's not always good. And when it's good, I appreciate the fuck out of it. And when it's bad, I learn to handle it.
You remember the moment when you kind of like, you had composure around the situation? You spoke about that first 48 hours. You were like all over the place.
It was when I got back. I got back. We all met up. We sat down, had coffee. It was like everyone sat round table and we kind of laid out the options. And I remember I go, am I crazy for wanting to just double down? And they all kind of looked at me like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, like maybe a little bit, but fuck it. And we all just kind of like went all in and called the manufacturer, worked on some new formulas. And I mean, we blitzed that. It was like the hardest we all had worked. Everyone's extra locked in. That's the good part about dangerous times too, right? It brings out the best in people if you're focused. Like that fight or flight instinct kicks, the house is on fire. You're figuring out, how can I go save the baby? You know, like you'll do superhero things. And so I've almost come to appreciate those times in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it makes for such a legendary story as well.
Makes for way better stories.
So anyway, you know what? You go on to you build Genius Brands, you sell it for 30 million to private equity. I want to get into the TikTok stuff and kind of like what you're doing now, because you spoke about TikTok Shop in 2024 is what Amazon was in like 2012, 2013.
Yep.
It's that scale of opportunity. And so just to begin, let's kind of level set. Like why do you say that? Like what is it that you're seeing with TikTok Shop that it's like, this is where the opportunity is?
So first I want people to appreciate how fundamentally the earth has shifted. The nature of commerce, the nature of everything because of short form content and discovery. The big deal for me that I like, and I'm saying this for all the 22, 25-year-old, like anyone under 25 that hasn't had life experience on the internet. The big moment in Amazon was when they surpassed Google for where people were searching for products. Prior to 2015, 70% of people started their search on Google. Amazon comes around, and within a couple years, Amazon was becoming the SEO platform for products. And that was like this moment where all of a sudden people are fundamentally shopping different, right? Like e-commerce is now gaining this level of scale, like this true pivotable force. It killed GNC, it killed Vitamin Shop, it killed a lot of categories that weren't primed for e-com. And it was so obvious in hindsight, right? Could you imagine a world without Amazon where you can one-click order? But back then it was less obvious. Although if you're really in tune with it, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is pretty clear. Now fast forward, the whole impact of the TikTok thing hit me about 2 years ago. Now you've seen all the influencers come up through this world. Like it's just a new wave. You've got the Hormozis. Hormozis basically like Gary Vee of this generation because of short form, right? And streamers and all that stuff. But that's been because of their adaptation to this this new way of communication and this new way of discovery. And then I'm planning a Tokyo trip with my wife, and all of a sudden she is not using Yelp. She's not using Google. She's not using any of these things to plan our activities or our dinners. She's going on TikTok and seeing the shit real time. Like, oh, that looks good. Like, okay, we're going to go here. And all of a sudden I go, oh, wow, this is like way bigger than simply like a dance app or whatever, right? Or a means to be an influencer. Like this is fundamentally going to rewrite the way everyone organizes everything. And kudos to TikTok. They've done a phenomenal job of forcing it down everyone's throats and making it addictive and getting this mass scale. And then TikTok wakes up one day and they go, well, we're not going to fall into the mistake Twitter made. Like we're going to be a platform where people make money. And then you look over into Asia and that's how everyone shops. They shop live streaming. They shop video discovery. Like there's not fancy Shopify websites. It's a whole different way of commerce. And TikTok goes, that's going to work here. And we're going to spend every dollar we have to make it happen. And so at first, I'm still hesitant as they roll out the shop platform. They're burning like $1 billion a day. They're doing their own fulfillment. They're not making money on the brands. And then I see the level of scale that starts happening. Like there's a brand that was relatively obscure on Amazon a couple years ago. They do maybe like 10 million a year. And all of a sudden they're doing 15 million a month on TikTok Shop, like third month in. And it's just creating this like broadcast system where even if you're not buying it on TikTok Shop, you're like, you'd know that brand in retail. Like you see it. And when that light bulb came on, I go, yeah, this is like clear. Like we've undergone a fundamental way that people communicate and shop, just like we did with Amazon. It's the exact same thing happening again, and it's presenting itself different, right? You have to learn different skills and all that, but it's as good as it comes. You have 1 billion shoppers and you can reach them without spending any money. That's the beauty of all of it. Like the fact I could reach so many shoppers back with Amazon without spending a dime, now you can do that in TikTok if you can master virality, if you can master like different means of communication. you can build something that exponentially scales without having to go raise a bunch of money and all that stuff.
You know what I was thinking about as you were speaking? It's actually interesting, that evolution that you describe. Because it's really about like, where does the customer journey start? Like, where do people start with when they're looking to buy something? And I remember growing up, right? Like, say that you wanted, I don't know, kitchen towel or like a new sofa or whatever. You would just go on Google and type that in and like see on the shopping results. And then to your point, there was a certain point, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, where you don't start on Google anymore. You go straight to Amazon and you type for that that product, and you don't even know if Amazon have it. You just assume that they do. They're the platform, like they're the place you go. And now, to your point, people's first discovery of a product is now starting on TikTok or on social media platforms.
On short form content. And I do think TikTok will win out. I don't think they get banned, but every time I talk about TikTok, I get someone in the comments, good thing it's going to be banned. Like if you put TikTok in the header of this, that'll be the first comment you get without anyone watching it. I don't think TikTok's going away, personally. But even if they do, it's IG shop, it's YouTube shop. Like this fundamental shift has happened. And I really want the audience to understand that nuance, because these skills, the ability to communicate in this era, are invaluable.
Okay, you know what I'm curious to get into, and this will be so valuable for the audience. You start Genius Brands in 2012, 2013. You start with $5,000, and you obviously end up selling it for 30 million. And so if you almost wanted to build the equivalent of what you did, like if we took Rob Oliver, maybe you have all the resources that you did in 2012 when you started, but you have all the learnings, the knowledge, the experience that you have now. And it's like you're seeing the opportunity on TikTok Shop, and you almost want to build like an equivalent business. Like you want to build a business in a similar way to how you did Genius Brands, but on TikTok. What is kind of step one in your mind? Like, where are you even starting that out?
Let me break. I'll break down the step by step for building a multi-million-dollar company in this era. But I want to highlight something really quick. I've gotten more into the social media world. I told you I wasn't with Genius, right? And when I started my latest brand, Top Shelf, it was Amazon only. And I have posted results and strategies and playbooks of that since we were doing like $2,500 a day. If you go back and look at my stories, you see like they're saved there. Top Shelf, $2,500 a day. This is cool. We made $200. Like $200 a day. It's life-changing. And then you fast forward to the Amazon growth was all there. Like we got it to a couple 100,000. But then you see the exponential spike when TikTok rolls out. And I'm transparent and talking about all of it. Like you see those numbers go from, 3,000, then 10,000, and then TikTok Shop's rolling out, and I'm posting $100,000 days. And this is like as real and clear as can get. And so that's one of the things that throws me off with this whole social world. You have a lot of people who talk about some of these things, and it's like, well, yeah, but okay, if it's so good, if they're getting so good, where's your business? Where's your brand? Or where's your, where's your money? I don't want to see Shopify screenshots. I want to see like, what are you doing? And so Top Shelf is the brand I've been building publicly. Like I said, we have a couple different ones, but this was not a resource intensive business when it starts. I'm not a guy that's going to put millions of dollars into something. Like I'm always going to be that guy that wants to find that avenue where I can start with $5,000 because that's profitable. It's scalable. Like I don't want investors and I don't want to burn millions of dollars trying to find out if something works. And so in today's world, you have that opportunity, and we've pivoted Top Shelf since TikTok Shop rolled out. You need a product. So this is step number one. And I always recommend people do something they're interested in. It's the internet. Like there's that whole idea of fuck your passions, do what makes money. But we have the luxury of doing stuff we're interested in because it's so broad. Everyone's buying everything e-com. And so you need to find a niche you're interested in. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about this. Like I loved Genius. I love nootropics. I love biohacking in that phase of my life. In today's world, if like fitness is your thing or whatever, there's a couple means of nailing down that actual winning product. The simplest way, you can open a brand new TikTok account, completely blank. You can go like products that you use, like period, in niches you're interested in. And what do you think is going to happen when you go back to that super genius AI algorithm? They're going to start feeding you the winning products. Like you are going to see like, oh shit, She Legit's becoming a huge thing. And like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And so you're fed countless ideas of a flagship hero product. So that's one method. You can use, there's like exploding topics, which shows all the buttoning search data, like broad in your category. Like, oh, all of a sudden, looks maxing is becoming a thing, and so and so is using like a jaw trainer. Like you're fed these ideas, and then you can cross-reference that on Amazon. Like, are people already moving into this world? Like, what is it saturated? What's it look like? So you can kind of nail down your winning product there. Fastmoss.com is another one that like not a lot of people know about that shows all of the data from TikTok Shop. Like you can see who's doing what. So that's your starting point. The second point, this is our Virgil Abloh rule. And all you need to do is improve that product by 3%. He's like, most of humanity was built on simply improving ideas by 3%. And so TikTok's so early, you see a lot of these ideas ripping, they are garbage. The branding is garbage. Like you could on accident improve something by 10%, and you don't need money for that. If you figure out some of these, like we use AI tools, bro, to like do half of our branding and graphics now, like DALL-E 2. And like, it's such this crazy time that if you just skill stack, you can do this from zero. So you improve the brand 3%. And then if you're younger and you're like native to TikTok, you can learn how to make the content yourself, because people misunderstand TikTok as Instagram. Instagram follower count matters. Like if you have a big Instagram count, it's valuable. If you have a TikTok, you can put out 3 videos and the third video gets 2 million views and you just made $20,000 off your product launch. So if you can learn that content style, I don't know how you can fail. Like if you make the product, improve it, and then learn the content yourself on TikTok Shop, you can be in the green without spending a dime. Now me, I don't make the content, right? I'm 32 years old and it's a young man's game.
Yeah.
But this is where the exponential scale comes in. You make a product that's designed for these affiliates to push, and all of a sudden there's this huge network of young kids who are masterful at making shit go viral for our product, right? They figured out the hooks, they figured out how to captivate attention, and they get that algorithm. You pay them a commission, like you take care of them. And that is the infinite scale game. Like we did $1 million on TikTok Shop our third month with TikTok or with Top Shelf because of those pieces. And does it all make sense? Like
Yeah.
it's painfully simple actually. And I think so many people are like, I don't know, it's usually not painfully simple to build like a multi-million-dollar business, but the blocking and tackling of this one is like so straightforward.
Yeah. I want to go deeper into each step, because you said step one is you want to find the winning product. And so you start that TikTok account and you start looking at different products, you're liking videos and the algorithm's feeding it back to you, and you're starting to see, okay, these are some of the industries. I'm curious for you, like, because when I look at what you did with Genius Brands and I see your content and even the way that you speak about it in interviews and in conversation, it feels like you were very intentional about going after something in the supplement industry. And then it also seems like you were pretty clear about how you were going to improve it.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people that are watching, I can imagine like they don't have that level of clarity, right? Like they don't have they're like, okay, are there certain industries that are like better than others?
No, of course.
And then you also mention it's almost like certain products are easier for these affiliates to make go viral.
Yep.
I've seen people, they're doing like, this was like a few months ago, maybe even a year ago, they were doing like the whole sex chocolate thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's easier to make it go viral because it's a bit like, it's naturally kind of controversial. And so how do you think about that? Like in terms of, are there certain industries, are there certain product types that you're specifically targeting?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the Tabs Tabs chocolate.
Yeah.
His roommate is my partner on a lot of this stuff. 22-year-old kid, and we invented this whole shit. Like for real. That's why when I see people nowadays popping up talking TikTok Shop, I'm like, you guys don't know. Sounds good, but you guys don't know.
Yeah.
We invented this game, and so from a product standpoint, like that's where I said we started iterating with Top Shelf. You need to be able to understand the product in 3 seconds and buy it within 10. So that's the frame of reference you have to look through with this era. But that's still very broad. I'll use an example of one of my students in $1 Million Brand Club, my guy Cole. I just invested in his business. Mouth tape. It's another one. He started for $5,000. He's into the Huberman stuff, biohacking. And so he sees there's this brand out there, Hostage Tape, that did like 10 million last year or something. And he hates the product. Like he uses it, but it's like shitty adhesive, doesn't like the branding. And so this dude calls up a manufacturer in China. He's like, hey, can you guys add a lavender scent to it? Like, can you just add a lavender scent to the thing? And then can you do something about this adhesive? And so fast forward 2 months and a couple grand, he has this new mouth tape product to market. It's Hybrid Tape. Like check it out on TikTok Shop. I'm super proud of this dude. I use it every night. And it's a dramatically better product. it cost him like the minimum order in China was like 500 pieces at $2 a pop. He did better branding. Like he kind of poured into kind of my whole framework. I don't want to bore everyone with, I mean, we could talk cult branding and like the obsessive nature of it, but he put all those pieces together. 3% is not a lot. His product's probably 25% better than the leading thing in that world. But he gets on TikTok Shop. He runs this exact playbook. His brother starts making the content and they're doing 100 grand a month in like their 4th or 5th month. And it's super profitable and it checks all of those boxes. And that was not complicated. I mean, it was as simple as going on Alibaba, typing in mouth tape, and there's like 50 people that want to make it for you. Hits them all up, like does the work, starts getting samples, and he's going to be the next $1 million brand in our community.
You know what's actually interesting, and it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, which is it works a lot better if you're actually interested in the product personally.
100%.
Because I can imagine a lot of people listening, it's like, especially if you're like a newer entrepreneur, this is the first business, one of the first businesses that you've started. It's like, how do I even improve a product 3%? But if you're the user, it should be kind of obvious.
No, it comes second nature.
Yeah.
And that's the entrepreneurial thing. It's like, and again, I try to simplify it to the point you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to come out with something totally new. You just find one of these categories and slightly iterate. Sometimes it really is as simple as better branding, which I don't really recommend that. I really like the entrepreneurial thing, like we're solving a problem. But you can succeed with just better branding. Like you can be number 2 on TikTok Shop to a shitty brand that doesn't really know what they're doing, and you can win. Tabs chocolate. Tabs was not the first sex chocolate. They were the first TikTok Shop optimized sex chocolate. And he charged $30 for a 3-piece of chocolate and printed like millions. But again, pretty straightforward. It wasn't like reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. You know what? I want to get into the branding and marketing side because I think that's a hugely important piece to it. Before we do, I'm kind of curious, what is your process or thought process around like testing product? Because I can imagine it's like someone starts going through this process and maybe there's several industries they're personally interested in. And you're like, is there like a testing phase where you're like buying different stuff and you're like, nah, actually this won't work? Or like you start kind of building a brand and then you like toss it aside. What is that process of you actually getting the thing which you're like, if we turn the marketing onto this, it will go?
Yeah, honestly, I've never done that. I know that's like a common talk track amongst e-com because I think a lot of people frame how Amazon is supposed to be or how this is supposed to be. But to me, if you're paying zero for traffic, like if you can make the content and you know there's a market for it, you can't fail. It's like too bad. Like, I mean, even Amazon was the early thing. I had some products that did unreal and made the business, and I had others that would stall out at like 10, 20, 30,000. But there weren't losses because all of the pieces were there. The knowledge was there. The brand was there. The search data was there. And so I really, like, I'm not a fan of like half-assing it. Like I get the need to want to test, but like, I know a kid that yerba mate is like a hot category. It's probably too late by the time this airs, but he was onto this like a year ago. And instead of going for it, he tested a landing page where he wasn't even fulfilling the orders. He just wanted to see how many people would buy it and then he'd refund them. And he wasted like 6-7 months doing that. And now yerba mate is as big as they come. I have another student who launched a yerba mate like kind of combo, and he did $7,000 yesterday on like his 3rd week in business in a day. And so to me, if the data is clear and the opportunity's there and you have confidence in what you're doing, like shoot the shot.
So it's basically if the product quality is there and there's the traffic, like you can get eyeballs to it, that's enough.
Exactly.
Okay, I get you.
It's when you can't get the traffic. That's why I said the hard part isn't often making the product. The hard part is having a window to scale it without breaking the bank. Like as Amazon got more difficult, that's where that narrative of Amazon saturated came from, because all of a sudden it was a lot harder. Whereas like TikTok right now is like, bro, you can, if you have the skills, you can sell literally whatever.
It's the speed. Okay, you know what? Let's talk about the branding. I think you called it cult branding.
Yeah.
Explain that. What does that mean?
So the best brands in the world mirror cults. Like actually, there's an emotional connection and relationship with the brand at its fundamental heart. And we're all susceptible to this. Like these pants, these are Chrome Hearts. I am part of the Chrome Heart cult. I know I could buy these same pants from Carhartt with the same exact quality for 1/100th of the price, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the nature of strong brand. And so when you look at all the strongest brands out there, there's a very clear intention on who they stand for and who they serve. My favorite story is the founder of Lululemon. When he started that business, he did not make XXL. because he did not want fat women wearing his product. And that's offensive and it's loud and it pisses all sorts of people off. But the end result is he's a billionaire. Okay. And like that's just objective. That's not me having like, oh, you should be supporting those people. Like I'm not here for any of that. I'm just telling you what made that work, what made that go. You look at like Harley. Harley caters to that's another cult brand, caters to a very specific market, a very specific person. And so whenever you're setting out on this journey, I think it's super important that you can summarize all of this with drawing a clear line in the sand of who is your business for? Who is your brand for? And then rejecting everyone else. Like it's not for everyone. It's for X, Y, and Z. And there's enough of a customer base there to get you from 0 to 1 million. I mean, I think Lulu's public now, right? And they're trying to go bigger and like, it's a whole different game. It's not working for them. They've got away from their roots. But I'm speaking to startup people. Like that's what I know. I know 0 to 10 million. And the harder you draw that line, the more you're going to connect and resonate with people.
You know, I want to read I saw a tweet when you said this. You said, Nike sells the same shirts as Reebok, yet people pay twice the price for a logo. You need to create a strong brand, one that has an emotional connection, that speaks to the pains and beliefs of the customer. Strong branding plus unique differentiators equal premium product.
Yeah, all day. And I think it's especially important when you're starting out to have that better margin to play with, right? Like if you're trying to commoditize and be like everyone else, if you're selling the same generic shirt as Reebok and or Nike and trying to beat them on price, what's going to happen? They're Nike, right? Like, so how are you setting yourself apart? Chrome Hearts is a great story. They are not for everyone. And they've built $1 billion business with like 26 stores by being extremely exclusive, extremely clear on who they serve. And the end result is, again, like success. You're a Drake fan?
Yeah.
Me as well. And there's Nike socks, and then there's Nike socks with Nocta on them that I buy that are like $5 more. It's the same sock, but I resonate with that brand. There's something about brand that forms identity in an individual. And the more you tap into that and can make it a part of someone's life, the better off you're going to be as the brand owner. Like as much as I can talk objectively about all this stuff, I can't stop the lure that is gallery department or Van Cleef or whatever, like Steve Jobs was the original one on this. Apple's the biggest cult there is. I mean, you go try to tell any iPhone user that like an Android's better and you're, maybe punches are being thrown, right?
Yeah, hands being thrown.
And the sooner you take that on your own journey and the more you appreciate it, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I'm curious to get deeper into your process. When you're building like one of these like brands on TikTok, like take me into the room, because you're someone that when I watch your content and what you do, you're very intentional about brand and messaging. Mm-hmm. And so when you're almost doing like the brainstorming or the strategy or the brand meeting, like what are some of those conversations that you're having? Because when entrepreneurs say you have to know your customer, I know how it feels to the person that hasn't built the business yet. It's like, it just feels so vague. Like, how do I know the customer? How do I know what's going to resonate with them? Like, where does your mind go? Like, take me into those rooms.
This is a great one. And I'll break this story down just objectively. Again, it's important here everyone remembers I'm relatively indifferent to a lot of this stuff. And as a brand owner, you can be you don't have to explain yourself, right? You don't have to explain most of it. You can do whatever and let the art sort itself out. And so if you go on social media, 18 months ago, before there was a wide ban, who was the most seen person?
Tate, probably. Yeah.
Tate, of course, right? Like you couldn't go on that app without seeing Andrew Tate. And it created this wild wave of the red pill stuff, like then Belmar and like Iman, like literally that's all there is. Our first home run product, it all coincided right with TikTok coming together. And Tate's strategy is actually what we use on products, like multiple accounts. But I remember going, well, there's a huge audience here that is not being sold to directly. Our first hero product was called Alpha Grind. And it's black packaging and it's like gold, it's a great coffee alternative. It's coffee plus nootropic. But we just positioned that in a way that this whole platform is already wildly like red pilled out, right? Like it was almost like it was comical, like how silly it was getting. And so we positioned the rebrand of Top Shelf. This was like iteration 2, because before that we were like a coffee company. And we positioned a lot of the branding just from an aesthetics, just from like all those components of something that would look like it sits on Tate's shelf on the War Room. And then as that's died out, and that got us from 0 to 10 million. And now as that's died out, we're again iterating. Like we're not here to, like I said, I'm not marrying to any trend or idea. It's like, who are the customers at the center of it? I just want, this is a brand that's going to help men level up. And so as that kind of lost steam, we're going through another big rebrand, and like I'm leaning so hard into the chrome hearts and I guess Drake's level of era of masculinity, where it's a more subdued, but like, I mean, who's going to tell Drake he's not him, right? And that's kind of the archetype. So that has faded out. We've pivoted, and that's what can take us from 10 to 100 million potentially. Chrome hearts, like it's that same kind of archetype. And so that was the room as that moment was going crazy. You can't open your phone and not see, whatever he's yelling about. And we leverage that to our advantage.
That's interesting. So you're actually observing like trends and culture, and then understanding the people that are supporting those movements, but understanding them on like a deep level.
At the center of that, it was a self-improvement thing, right? However you dress it up, like we're not over here getting wildly political with it. Like at the center of that young man consuming that content wants to be tougher. He wants to go to the gym. He wants to start kickboxing. Like, so let's make a product for that and let's align it because it's there. Another one, like right now, we almost went all into this, and I pulled back because I don't think it's a fully fleshed out idea. But there's a subset of men that are leaning into looks maxing. Not sure if you've seen this, but it's like 16 to 20-year-old kids that are hyper focused on their looks, almost in like a feminine way. Like they're doing their facial routines and they're like all these different things. So we could probably
like the nail polish stuff, I guess.
No, not full nail polish. It's more just like literally like how you're getting your hair cut, and like it is very sassy. Like they're 16 and like skinny, like they're not hitting the gym, so like they get kind of pigeonholed as like, they get bashed a lot. But at the center of that, there's clearly a cry for something, right? And there's a movement that's getting tens of millions of views. Well, what kind of product could you sell that audience? Like we had a men's moisturizer in the works that I know would sell because the data is there. Like it's serving that movement.
That's actually really interesting. That's really interesting. And so I'm actually curious then. So what are kind of, because you mentioned with that specifically, you kind of pulled back. So what is the differentiator of what makes you go all in on a movement and be like, okay, we're going to build the product, we're going to build the brand, we're going to go all into this, versus it's not quite right? Like, what are the key differentiators?
With that, if I had a brand new brand, I would build something to the looks maxing community. Like it was just at that phase of it. Whereas Top Shelf has gotten to a certain point, and I don't think that existing market, because we built it in a way that like, you should be hitting the gym. You should be living more kind of how I try to design my life as kind of the customer. Whereas that was still too sassy masculinity, if that makes sense. Like it was still it just didn't align. But the opportunity's there. It's just my brand at that point had graduated from that size of a market.
Yeah, I'm curious what your life looks like on a day-to-day in terms of how you're observing trends. Because it sounds like you kind of have your finger on the button of like where everything is going and like where the movements are and what products. Like, what is it that you're doing? Are you just on your iPhone and you're on TikTok, or like are there tools that you're using?
I say in this world, we get to live for a living. Like we get to exist in this culture, like how we design our life ultimately becomes the same things we're fed, the same circles we run in, the same algorithms. Like if you keep living a particular way, you drift more into these worlds. And the important part with it is to be an observer. Like we're all on TikTok. 99% are as consumers. Who's actually observing it like objectively is like, oh, this is an interesting idea, or oh, this is bubbling up. And so I think I've just gradually learned to take more of like a neutral approach with all of it, right? And not get swept away. And like, I try not to have opinions on many things. I try to just view it as like, yeah, this is the movement that's happening. Like you see Drake paint his nails, you see Yachty paint his nails. And then I test stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna paint my nails. I paint like, who's gonna say anything to me? I box or whatever. And I did that, 777s. Like I thought they were fly. But just existing within that culture and then being able to kind of play off it's fun as long as you're observing.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting and it's smart is that because you're an objective observer, you can actually go like a layer deeper and start to see like, well, what are like the desires and like what are the needs that people are trying to get with this behavior? What's
the fundamental thing they're trying to achieve, and then how can you influence it? Because both looks maxing and the red pill thing were just unique cries for help, an underserved audience that was trying to better themselves. However that manifests in the end result, like, that's where people start getting strong opinions and it's right or it's wrong. But what's the center thing going on there? And the more you can tap into that, the more money you can make, as bad as that sounds. But like, that's how I approach it.
Yeah. Okay, let's take it Let's take it deeper. So let's say that I found the winning product. I've then developed like a unique product, which is 3%. Let's even say it's 5%, 7% better. I'm very clear on like who the customer is, what the brand story, all of this. What are the actual practical steps of me now promoting that product on TikTok? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk manufacturing? I get asked all the time too, where do we get it made? Like, where do you get the product made? I don't want to gloss over that because that's one of those things to me, it's second nature. There's manufacturers that want to make your shit. Like, if you Google mouth tape manufacturer, you're going to find 5 pages of people that do that. So seriously, Google and then bang in the phones. Because that's where I think a lot of people get hung up. They don't know where the product gets made. Am I making it in my kitchen? But no, you're working with a contract manufacturer. There's all sorts of them.
Just quickly, when you say bang the phone, so like you'd find a manufacturer on Google and then what, you're calling the factory and like what is even happening in that call?
You're finding a salesperson and telling them you got a product and these are your, this is your budget. These are your minimums. Like, I want to bring this to market. Can you help? And a lot of them, like, maybe it won't be a good fit. Maybe they only work with huge brands. But eventually you're going to find that boutique manufacturer like I did with Genius that'll scale with you. Those guys I didn't pay them for the whole run. I gave them a deposit. They took a little risk on me and they grew with me over the years. But their business is to make those products, right? Like, they don't keep the lights on unless they're making X amount of bottles per year. So there's a whole ecosystem out there that wants to support you as a brand owner.
Are there mistakes that people make when it comes to the manufacturing point of like, I'm assuming you get sent prototypes or
you get samples and stuff like that. Yeah, manufacturing, it can be a tricky world. Again, if you're starting out, like, work the phones and all those things tend to sort themselves out. Like, it's a relationship game. Some manufacturers can be shady. Some don't hold their lead times right. But that's why I recommend calling 10 to 15 just to get your feet wet, right? And figuring out what works. But yeah, I mean, that's generally a pretty complex topic. But to bring something to market is not that complex. It gets way harder when you're trying to do like, I'm trying to do 1 million bottles or whatever. And I need to lock down supply chain. But at that point, you have the skills and the confidence, right?
Yeah, you've built it up. Okay, so let's assume then that we have the manufacturing sorted out. Like we can fulfill orders, and now we're just like, how do we get the traffic on top of it? Explain that game to me of like actually marketing the product on TikTok.
Yeah, so TikTok Shop, the platform is like super straightforward. You go, like an LLC or something like that. Make sure you're doing it under a new business. But then you open up a TikTok Shop account. You put all your info in. You list your product. It's like, you need a picture of it. You get it up there. And now all of a sudden you're in the game. You choose your sale price. Like, you are officially listed on TikTok Shop. You have 0 eyeballs and 0 sales. But that's where, if you learn that skill of making, most of it's faceless, bro. Like, people think it's like, oh, are you an influencer talking? No, a lot of it's like the kid holding the phone and the product whips in. It's like, this legendary herb has been around for like, it's a very specific content style. And if you master that by either studying the others or, there's YouTube channels there starting to break it down. I told you the Tab's roommate, he runs a whole program now. Like, that's where I get all my creators. He has a program training 15 to 24-year-old kids how to make, it's like $10,000 a month doing this. But I'm the one writing the checks. Like, it's for real. I want as many creators as possible. So if you're young watching this, like, that is the side hustle, in my opinion, that can get you started. And so if you learn to make that, all of a sudden you're in the game. And then it's just how many videos are you putting out per day? Oh, fulfillment, right? You need to have somewhere to fulfill the product. Everyone uses a 3PL. TikTok Shop is partnered with ShipBob. So basically you get that run off the manufacturer, you send that inventory to ShipBob, you plug in with them, and they'll fulfill every single order off of TikTok Shop for you. Money starts going up.
Yeah, that's super easy. I'm curious because you work with so many creators. Can you even see someone, and maybe they haven't even really made that many videos, but you can just see the way they are and like the way that they create, and you're like, okay, they're gonna make like viral content.
Oh,
like,
yeah. And I mean, and the good ones often aren't for sale, right? Like, you're trying to, the best case is you're taking a bet on, like, it's like venture capital. You pay 10 of them a retainer and 9 of them go bust. And then 1 of them gets you 5 million views and it just paid for the whole thing, your whole product run. And you're like, shit, I need more inventory. But that's generally kind of the game. The more you kind of pour into that world and learn it, there's new talent popping up every day.
So the 1 out of the 10 that is like the star, that is the outlier, what is it that they're doing? Like, when you think about it, like, what is so special about their content? Like, what do those common features tend to be?
They almost always, like, I don't like this almost sounds bad, but there's almost like a little autistic component sometimes that they just get the algorithm. Like the ones that invent the new strategies, there's this one that everyone does now, and it came from our group, but it's this like deep AI voice. You've probably seen it on like the motivational stuff, but it's like it's Adam on 11 Labs, and it's like if you took Alpha Grind for 21 days, this is what would happen to your body. And a lot of time it's just like a very unique creator who's been like living and breathing that since they were, young. Like how old are you?
I'm 26.
26. So, like, when did you have a phone? For like
Probably 13, 14.
13, 14. So you largely grew up with a phone.
Yeah.
The 18-year-olds, like, that's been their screens have been their world, right? They don't even have a computer. Like you're probably on a laptop more than or just as much as a phone.
Yeah.
I was phone in high school, right? So like I'm native to it, but not like them. Where you have some of these kids that were making TikToks in high school, they just get it. They know it's like hook, keep them watching, repeat, some sort of engagement. And that's the equation. Like I can tell you the equation all day. I still don't have the same natural gift that Sydney, there's a girl here in Brooklyn that she was like one of the star creators. She made like 120,000 her third month doing it because she's just in tune with it. Like she was working at Chipotle, finds this whole Creators Corner thing. She's like, well, this is what people want to hear. Starts getting the reps up. That's the other thing. It's like, it's a rep game. You're not going to go viral your first 5 videos. But the more you do it, like the more swings at bat, and like eventually it's going to happen.
I'm curious then, so because there's people that can go viral. I don't know this for TikTok, but I've seen it in other forms of social media. There's people that get a ton of attention but can't sell product. So is it the same with TikTok where like there's certain creators that they can make viral creative, but it doesn't necessarily lead to sales?
Yeah, I think the beauty of this world is these are all sales-driven videos. So like they're not showing their face. It's almost always optimized to be about the product with some claim or some story. That's why I think influencers are dying. Like there's a lot of influencers that have mad reach, but people don't take them seriously or whatever, right? And you pay that person a couple $1,000 for a post because they have a big audience, and the end result is 0 sales. Whereas this is like hyper-focused, sales-driven content. And there's still a scale. Like, some videos will get way more reach and still not sell that much. And some will only do a couple 100,000 views, but it's such a targeted video, it sells. But in general, like the way this is approached, it's sales first.
I'm curious, like you mentioned that this is like a similar magnitude of opportunity to what Amazon was. What are some of the craziest things that you're seeing with like people that are doubling down on it? Like what are some of the results that they're even getting?
This is brand Guru Nanda, who's another Amazon-friendly brand who's doing a couple million a year. They've done $38 million now since they've started on TikTok Shop. And it's like a mouth rinse that, have you seen it? Like it's all over a lot of people's Explore pages. But again, they just kind of figured if we go viral, we make sales. Let's figure out how to go as viral as possible. You're familiar with the Tate strategy? Like just how you had all these different accounts going from affiliates?
Explain it to people.
The Tate strategy, why everyone saw Andrew Tate every single day from however long to however long was because he had affiliates that were trained in repurposing Tate podcast interviews. And a lot of creators are using this style now. Like I will. Like you'll see clips of this on my secondary accounts, right? But the idea was the more swings at bat, the more likely you are to go viral. And so all of a sudden he has hundreds of affiliates putting out 2 to 3 Tate videos per day. Most of them never see the light of day. And then all of a sudden one gets 10 million views. And then now this guy's on your algorithm more and more. And so it's really the same idea. It's how are we getting as many swings at bat as possible? And so Guru Nanda figured that out early on. They've done 38 million so far in 6 months. There's a product like 15-day gut cleanse. I have no idea who they are, where they came from. And they did $10 million last month. So the numbers are as real as you could possibly like dream of. I mean, it's like those are sustainable, life-changing business numbers. But yeah.
You know what? Here's where I want to end, because I started by reading this tweet. In the last 10 years, I've nearly lost my business. I sold it later for $30 million. I dodged cancer. I became a father of 2, and I found God during dark times. And so I want to end with that final bullet point. I found God during dark times.
So
what is that moment?
Have you've heard me kind of hint at abundance and growth, like all of that stuff throughout this interview, right? And my whole story, I'll kind of summarize it in a shorter form, but after selling that company, there was like a window of emptiness where you get this, huge wire into your bank account and you feel like you made it, and then you refresh it 10 times that day, and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and literally nothing is different. And you kind of go, what is my purpose? Like what am I doing here? And I had been a guy that always felt guided or in tune with this very spiritual energy as I was kind of coming up. Like I always felt like the steps I was making were guided. I felt like I was making moves operating from my heart. And then that wire hit. And for whatever reason, it led to this emptiness and this progression down this like rational rabbit hole, like trying to make sense of everything in a very non-awe-inspiring manner. Like everything is dictated by randomness and chance. And that's just how this universe shakes out. And those who make it are lucky, and so on and so forth. And I had 2 years of really not a good existence. Like when I look back at those years, they were very empty. And eventually this led to, I had this melanoma cut off my ear, which is a form of skin cancer. I have no idea what this thing is. And I'm kind of going through life on autopilot. I'm trying to learn how to be wealthy. I'm trying to learn how to protect my money, right? I want to make sure that's like passed along. That's all I think about. There's no growth. There's just like, I got this chunk. Let me invest it right. Let me make the right decisions. And then one day I like have this kind of growth going on behind my ear, and my wife flags it for me, and I don't think anything of it. For those of you who aren't familiar with melanoma, it's like I think the leading cancer that kills younger people, like under 50. It's a skin cancer. And the basic idea with it is it starts on your skin, and if you cut it off within a certain amount of time before it grows to a certain point, you're good. But if it tunnels down and it starts to get in your body, you are in for a whole nother round, like world of treatment, and your life changes. Your life all of a sudden becomes the melanoma. And so I'm going on with life. I'm still kind of like I don't listen to anybody. My health's fine. Like that's just how I am. And my wife flags this thing for me, and I like ignore her for a while. And I'm back in Seattle visiting my parents one summer. And the day before I'm supposed to leave, my mom goes, "You're going in. Like, I have a dermatologist appointment today. You're taking that. Like you're going in." And I was like, yeah, whatever. And so I go in, I sit down. I still have no idea like the seriousness of any of this. And the doctor looks at it and he goes, "That is coming off today." And I'm like, okay. Like I'm still not really, I'm like, whatever. And dude like numbs me up, does this whole surgery, like cuts out this big chunk behind my ear. We leave the next day, headed back to Puerto Rico. We stop in Texas for a week, visiting some friends, family. And I get a call from that same doctor, and he goes, "Hey, are you sitting down?" And I'm like, "I'm driving. Like, what's up?" And he's like, "Well, we got the autopsy back, and blah, 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 blah. You're going to have to go, find the nearest major cancer center, and you need to go schedule an appointment." He's like, "The good news is I think we got this like in plenty of time, and like, you're like, I think we got it, but you need to go in for this, this, and this." And basically like that day, I still don't know what's going on. I'm still kind of not thinking anything of this. And I'm invincible, right? I'm 28, 29. I have millions of dollars. I like am plugging along with my life. Like stuff like this doesn't happen. I'm in great shape. Like I'm not thinking of health stuff. And basically I have to go into this cancer hospital. Like I had no insurance. Like, I was in Puerto Rico at the time, so no US insurance. And we're just passing through. And next thing I know, it's like this scramble to find an appointment at oncology in, one of these major cancer centers. And I remember when we finally did, walking in to that place, and seeing the devastation, because you're in there with, you see people that are probably terminal and fighting tooth and nail, and it's like a really fucked up reality. And long story short, they go in, they have to do another surgery to clear the margin, like rip all this stuff out. And the basic takeaway was like, yo, if you had waited like a couple more weeks, like that shit was starting to tunnel down, and like you're living a whole different life. And so from that point, again, it's that reoccurring presentation of death. That fucked with me so tough. I just had my second daughter, and I remember just like wrestling with the reality of life, and again, that it could be gone. And then I looked back to the abundant me that had built genius, and then the rational me of the last 2 years that hadn't done shit fun and was focused on like just trying to be the smartest guy in the room. And eventually through like a series of events, it was like God slapping me. It was like all these different things, like I kept seeing this Bible verse, Isaiah 41:10, do not fear, I'm with you. And I spent like a year, bro, like really contemplating existence. Like, oh my God, this could be taken away. I'm not going to see my kids grow up. Like, what is the point of any of this? And that's what kind of led me on the whole. Eventually, on the other side of that, I was like, oh no, this is almost like another second shot at this. And this is the life maxing movement. This is like, I want to go travel. I want to live for a living. I want to design my life so that I leave my mark while still experiencing life to the fullest. And it was through those really dark times. Like again, the whole mental thing's real, right? And you talk about, I had created this narrative that like, oh my God, I'm going to die, or like, it's going to come back, or this, that. And it took me a long time to get over that. But on the other side of it was this blessing that, wow, I'm 31, 32, and I get to create this however I want. And eventually that's what led to Rob the Bank. That's what led to these new businesses. That's what led to all the new growth, where I'm operating from like a true place of being in tune with that voice, that person. That's all I answer to. I don't answer to others' expectations for me. I know like I'm blessed and have the opportunity to create in this world and operate from a place of abundance. And once I doubled into that and let go of all the rationale, like randomness, luck, whatever, life has been so dramatically better. It's not even funny. And it just keeps getting better. And so I think there's importance in that message. And we're just getting started.
Yeah. You know what? One of the things you said, you said it was almost like God was slapping you in the face.
Slapping me, bro.
And you know what? When I was just listening to you recount that story, it's almost eerie in a way, because the same way that you describe that experience sounds oddly familiar with what happened with your grandma.
Yeah.
Where it's like this kind of innocuous event, like you don't even really think it's something, like the mole that's growing on the back of your ear, or oh yeah, she was just going in to get like a treatment done. And then it ends up being something so much more huge. And even when you were telling the story about the melanoma, it's like going into that center and it's like just a world of devastation. And I'm curious for you, like when you go back into that moment, was it like eerie for you? Was it almost like, this is almost like a sick experience? The fact that the similarities between what I went through with your grandma and how devastating that was, and then being there yourself.
It was sickening. And like to this day, like you talk about how strong our minds are and our bodies and thoughts can create stuff. I box like right near that cancer hospital. There's a boxing gym I go to, and I have to drive by it. And when I drive by it, I was just there a couple weeks ago, and I'm well removed from this entire situation. But as I'm driving past that, there's like a chilling, like your skin crawls. And I feel like a physical burning where they took it off. Like I literally feel that. And my life was like that forever. I used to give in to those thoughts. It was like, it would like melt you down. And I still feel it when I drive by that place, after having not been there for a while. And I still remember those memories of seeing like, the mom with her kid with the, hat because she doesn't have any hair. But I frame it and I know it to be like a blessing at this point. Like I move past it and I drive past there and I tuck it away, and I'm just like, man, like that happened to me, and I'm really happy God brought me to this next point in my life. But I still feel it, when I drive by there. And I guarantee you, if I ever went back to University of Washington where my Nana passed away in that emergency room, I would feel that same room. But that's life. We got to roll with it.
You know what you said? You said life maxing. I guess the opposite of that is just it's over, like death.
The opposite is nihilism. It's that subtle depressive thing that Chris talks about. The opposite is going through life on autopilot with no purpose, no intention of purpose, a real numb to the reality is that we will eventually expire.
Would you say that's like kind of your biggest fear? Like what would you say is your biggest fear?
I try not to have fears at this point, because we're not in control of a lot of it. I think you lean into the power of this universe, of this God, whatever it might be, and try to be in tune with that mission and then live it to the fullest, because we are going to die. Like I got to a point with all of it that I no longer had a fear of death. Like I know my father passing away will be that next big painful thing. And I know I need to be a certain point in my life for that. Right. And so all these are inevitable realities that you can't be scared of, but rather accept and then look at your own life through that lens, because it's going to mold you onto better things.
You know what? Just finally, you spoke about kind of like this this relationship with your dad, like right in the beginning, there's almost like this competitive streak to it. I'm curious, like where is that like right now? Like how do you reflect on that right now?
My dad is largely opposite of life maxing in the sense of he came from nothing. He's always been super frugal. He could like afford a first class ticket, but would rather fly in the back of the plane because that's who he is. I'm just slowly breaking him down to the abundance of life. So like I'm taking my whole family to Jackson Hole in a couple weeks, and I chartered a jet. You know, it's like 22 grand or something, and it's just so unnecessary. But I know that experience will stick with him. Like you have to live what you believe at the end of the day. And if you're living in truth, like I know that's going to make one of those experiences that's just indefinitely legendary to him. I took him he used to take me to basketball games growing up. Like we'd always sit like, decent seats, but whatever. I took him to the Mavs game, courtside, for the playoffs. And it was he stops worrying about what it costs when he starts living life, And so I'm going to continue to just do what I've always done, which is live my truth and try to bring good experiences to other people. And I'm trying to bring that to my home life now too, with family and all that, because it's fractured a lot of things. And again, when I look at through that lens, that hey, this guy maybe has 10 to 20 years left. Like what kind of experiences do I want to be having? Like, will I really worry about spending 20 whatever thousand on a jet, or will I remember that time that we had a blast in Jackson Hole? It was my dad's first private jet experience. The answer is pretty clear, right, at that point. So that's where I'm at with all of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, can I ask you a question real quick?
Go for it.
You love your mom to death, I can tell, yeah?
Yeah, more than anything, yeah.
Yeah. She'd be proud of this, yeah?
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it through that lens, like, I know my Nana will be proud of all this too. It's like, if you live your life in that level of truth, like, that shit shines through at the end. So thanks for having me, bro, for real. I think you're, like, destined for elite things with this. Like, I know you're about it, and it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really a dream for me that I get to do this. It's surreal that this is what I do full time and every week. So if you enjoy the content, if you enjoyed the conversation, the stories, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us immeasurably with growing the channel, with getting guests, all of those things. So please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.